The world's most vital energy artery is under a chokehold. President Trump has ordered a total blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, daring Tehran to blink. The blockade has come into effect. The president has issued a fresh warning, saying that if any Iranian ship comes anywhere close to our blockade, they will be immediately eliminated using the same system of kill that we use against the drug dealers on boats at sea. The U.S. blockade comes despite Iranian armed forces warning that restrictions on ships in international waters amounts to piracy. Iran also issued a dire warning that no ports in the region will be safe if Iranian ports were under threat.
Iran and India has a good relation, and in this case we have a good contact, and we believe that we should prepare a good preparation, and I think that in this case, the relevant institution in Iran will have a stance in the near future.
U.S. military says any vessel entering or departing the blockaded area without authorization is subject to interception, diversion, or even capture. U.S. military says blockade applies to all vessel traffic regardless of their flags. In a note sent to seafarers, the U.S. military says that the blockade will not impede neutral transit passage through the Strait of Hormuz to or from non-Iranian destinations. The U.S. military has not offered details yet about the blockade, including how many U.S. ships will enforce it, whether warplanes will be used. With enough warships, the U.S. Navy could set up a blockade that intimidates many commercial tankers from trying to power through with Iranian oil. A full network built for dominance, but dominance brings risks. Will the United States forces stop Iranian vessels? That risks direct conflict. Also, what happens to Chinese vessels? Will the U.S. Navy board them or even stop them? The naval embargo is intended to shrink Iran's capacity to fund its defense by limiting the revenue it generates from oil exports. But such an operation risks further destabilizing global energy markets and triggering a new surge in oil prices. It also jeopardizes a fragile 2-week ceasefire agreed by the United States and Iran last Tuesday. After devising the blockade, the Trump administration is hopeful that Iran will be more willing to accept a deal meeting U.S. demands. But the Islamic regime has repeatedly shown it is not willing to capitulate to pressure. It believes it has the upper hand in the conflict, with the strait its main point of leverage. While Trump claims that U.S. allies want to help with the operation, so far no country has pledged support. The UK has already conveyed to Trump that it will not join any blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Spain has said that the blockade would make no sense. Similarly, European countries and NATO are yet to pledge support to the US.
The ongoing closure of the Strait of Hormuz is greatly damaging, and the restoration of the freedom of navigation is of paramount importance for us.
U.S. military says blockade will be enforced in the Gulf of Oman and Arabian Sea east of the Strait of Hormuz. Geographically, in particular, will be one of the biggest hurdles for the U.S. The Strait of Hormuz lies between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. At its narrowest point, it is just 33 kilometers wide, giving ships little space to make any maneuvers. The location also gives Iran over 1,600 kilometers of coastline to launch attacks if it decides to do so. The economic fallout is already here. Oil has jumped back above $100 a barrel, and the global stocks are on a free fall. Before the war, over 100 ships transited these waters daily. Now, marine trackers report the sea is a graveyard. Nothing is moving through the Strait of Hormuz. Professor Peter Kuznick is a professor of history and director of the Nuclear Studies Institute at American University. He is now joining us live from Washington, D.C. Professor, it's good to see you and thank you very much for your time. How do you think this will play out? Because Europe is so against the closure and the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, and Trump is insisting that the blockade has to happen, and he's actually issuing more threats as the day goes by.
Before the blockade, at least a trickle of oil was getting through the Strait of Hormuz. Now that looks like that stopped completely. We see the impact already. The price of oil is shooting up. Price of gas is soaring. People are going to be feeling it in their pocketbooks, and it's only going to make the global situation worse. We're already in a global crisis that people are predicting is going to cause a recession and possibly a depression worldwide. And people can't get the fertilizer they need for planting. They can't get the oil and gas they need for energy. They can't get the helium that they need. So a lot of things that people aren't able to get right now, and this is only going to make things worse.
Sir, what do you assess, or what is your assessment of what is Europe doing right now? Because the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is actually marshalling up signatures, and he has already gotten 40 signatures from around different countries around the world, saying that this blockade does not make sense. And that is actually Spain, which said that this blockade does not make sense. And Ursula von der Leyen also says the same thing, that this blockade does not really make sense.
I would take it back further and say this war doesn't make sense. If their real concern was limiting Iran's nuclear program, we had achieved that with the JCPOA in 2015 until Trump tore it up in 2018. What about this war makes sense? I don't see anything. And the Europeans don't. But they've been hesitant to directly attack Trump and talk about the illegality of the war, except for some exceptions, like Sanchez in Spain has been very outspoken, and even Meloni's been outspoken in Italy. But the Trump administration, Trump regime, was really embarrassed by what happened in Hungary with the defeat of Orban in Hungary. And now they're suffering one defeat after another. Trump said he had the support of other countries on this blockade, but nobody has come out and supported him except for Netanyahu, and that hardly counts as support. So, and we don't know what it can't help the situation in Iran for the Iranian government, because it's going to cut off some of the money that they need. But it's not going to be decisive if even that bombing of their infrastructure and the threats to end Iranian civilization in 24 hours didn't convince the Iranians to make a deal. This is not going to convince them either.
Professor, we'll have to end this discussion here. Let's see what plays out or pans out in the Strait of Hormuz, because that is now the new flashpoint. Professor, thank you for talking to us today.
Thank you for having me.